For those of you who may not know, there's currently a rather substantial war going on online. It happens to be a war between gamers and the gaming press. What happened was it was uncovered that an indie game developer had personal connections to at least 5 people, 2 of which this person had a sexual relationship with, at least. And one of them happened to be a writer for game journalism. And this person happened to mention this indie game developer's game in articles. And this wasn't disclosed publicly, which is very much an ethics violation. So that was what started this. But it goes a lot deeper than that. We also went back to this indie developer's Patreon account, and we saw that actually a substantial number of game journalists are contributing to this person in their project, which is also a direct ethical violation of any journalistic standards. And this would have been a minor story. This would have been a story that could have been dealt with very easily. But what happened first was substantial censorship. The Reddit thread rgaming had over 25,000 comments deleted about this because no one wanted to talk about it. We had blog posts from people at these companies saying they were literally told, if you continue talking about this or potentially talk about writing a story about this, you will be fired. We will fire you for doing this. And when this came out in videos, one of the first videos to talk about this was DMCA'd, and it happened to be by the indie developer. And then the second video opened up just a torrent of also some hate, absolutely some hate. It's the internet. Hate's rampant, especially on controversial topics, and it's wrong. And the gaming community has done a very good job of openly condemning it. The people who started this have come out numerous times in videos and said, stop it, don't harass people, don't do any of that, because it's only hurting the cause. But what has also come out was that this isn't just a problem with this one case. There are cases where we're having journalists there sitting on consulting boards for companies that are consulting indie development gaming, and who have written positive press about their projects and encourage people to check them out for their friends. We're talking about sexual relationships, financial relationships, even just close friendships. There's a person on a development company called Silverstring Media, and this person happens to be close friends with the chair of the Indie Games Festival. And guess which games that were presented to the Indie Games Festival happened to win that year? A fair number from Silverstring Media. And none of this is disclosed. None of this is disclosed on these journalistic websites. None of this has been talked about, and the most shocking part is how the gaming press has responded. They've literally been calling gamers things like terrorists and misogynists. On August 28th, about 10 articles on several different journalist websites came out saying that, is the gamer identity dead? On the same day. And it's just, the reason I wanted to talk about this and bring this up today is because there's a reason why the press coverage about this has been so vitriolic, and it's because the initial developer who was outed was a woman, and for lack of a better term, a social justice warrior. And that's what they've been rallying behind and saying this is all about misogyny and sexism and stuff. And to be abundantly fair to them, there is definitely some of that. But that's not what most of the gaming community is upset about. What we're upset about is this lack of transparency. And then on top of that, to be told by journalists on Twitter accounts that we are worse than ISIS for wanting this transparency is what is really disturbing. So I wanted to present this today because for most people who aren't following this and aren't in the gaming community, the most obvious case where they're going to hear about this story is from those very journalist outlets. So it's not getting out there the way it needs to be, and I wanted to say something. But the tables are turning. There's a Slate article out today saying actually it's gaming journalists that are going to be irrelevant and obsolete soon, especially when they're frickin' alienating their audiences like this. Eric Kane from Forbes recently did one article where he didn't understand things, and then a second article where he came back and said, actually, yes, 10 articles saying is the gamer identity dead on the same day is a little weird. And the gaming journalists shouldn't be doing this. This is ridiculous. We've had major internet, prominent YouTubers, Boogie2988, Total Biscuit, John Tron, who have come out asking for more integrity from the journalists, and then have gotten tons and tons and tons and tons of flack from people supporting these journalists and supporting people like Anita Sarkeesian, who the only reason she's involved is because she released a video about bullying and terrorism in video games in the middle of this. That's the only reason she was even involved. But because of all of that, the gaming the gaming journalist scene has chosen to brand this all as just sexism and misogyny and almost refusing to deal with it. There have been some concessions. Stephen Totilo from Kotaku has come out and said that actually, yes, this Patreon support for indie developers is a problem. I've told my company to cease this immediately. But unless there's a system of checks and balances, that's not going to fly. And now before I pass this on to everybody else, I just wanted to read something here. This is the Reuters Handbook for Journalist Integrity, and here's the basic contents, and here are the list of things that they want and you need to be about journalist and by Reuters standards. Subject 1 is take no side, tell all sides. So right off the bat, the fact that these journalistic outlets aren't talking about this from the side of the gamers is evidence of a problem. Discriminatory language and stereotypes, calling gamers worse than ISIS and terrorists, and then in one image literally portraying them as or comparing them to Hitler Youth. That's the one. Political community activity, equal opportunity in the newsroom, diversity in the newsroom, media interviews and speaking engagements. All of this is what the gaming journalist community does not have. And yet these are the people who the gaming community turns to when looking for opinions on games and what they should buy and problems with gaming. And we've just now hit a point where the corruption and nepotism is so rampant that as a result, their web traffic has utterly dropped and plummeted, and rightly so. This is what happens when you lie, when you profiteer, and when you call people terrorists. A journalist calling gamers terrorists after we've had 2 real journalists beheaded by ISIS. This is what happens when you show you have no ethics. This isn't about sexism. This is not about misogyny. What this is about goddamn transparency from the fucking journalists who get their damn paychecks from the ad revenue we provide.
Okay, well, I mean, there are a number of things there, and I think first of all is that with gaming in particular, I consider myself a gamer, is that kind of those within who kind of take on that title of gamer, there's some of the most fanatical, and by which I mean kind of passionate people about that. So there is going to be a certain increased level of language when talking about these things. But I think that with gaming journalism is that it's a fairly, first of all, gaming journalists, it's a very fine line because you have, you don't really get theatre or film journalists, you get film critics. And with gaming, some of them are critics, some of them are journalists, and they're opinionated journalists for the most part. And if you go through kind of Reuters or AP and their journalistic guidelines, that's an iffy line to tread. But I think also the reason why this story has become such a tightly wound ball of passion is because, first of all kind of gaming is done through online, so all the internet community is really active for the first part. So that's why you're going to have so many, 25,000 comments on Reddit and what have you. But also the fact that it's fairly new, and I don't think there's enough. Many of the people who go into gaming journalism they don't have any journalism qualifications. You know, their first job, they've just lucked into it because they did a bit of writing. They don't have any official training. I think also because it's fairly new and it's very condensed, it is still quite niche, I think, for the most part, certainly gaming journalism. Whereas if you went into any other form of journalism, if you went into, I don't know, kind of hunting journalism or trucking journalism, or I'm just thinking of all kind of redneck ones at the moment, but, you know, any other niche form of journalism, sports journalism, for the most part, I think that you probably would find a certain level of, you know, kind of back-patting, you do me a favour, I'll do you a favour, that sort of thing. I think it goes on within all journalism. Journalists do need to be more clear about, you know, their sources and their relations to other people. I just think that journalism is so kind of new, and because it's so new, everyone knows everyone within the industry to some extent. I think that's why some of the problems have arisen, and I think as it grows more and more, as esports grows and gaming grows, it becomes more of a kind of a business industry, that the kind of the degrees of separation between the people with industry will spread out, and this will become a bit less of a problem. I mean, I won't go into, you know, I'll leave the misogynist comments aside, because I think you can go into any industry and there will be certain levels of misogyny there. I think, you know, gamers, they have that tradition of, you know, oh, they're all misogynist, they're just teenage boys in their bedroom wanting to shoot people, online, of course. But, you know, a study came out recently where the largest demographic of gamers now are middle-aged women. So, you know, that stereotype now, that's going to be it's going to take a few years for that stereotype to be shrugged off, but it's no longer the case anymore. Gaming is becoming more and more mainstream, and I consider it to be mainstream these days. But yeah, I think the problems, because it's so new and it's so insular, they will filter out, and it's been good that these have been brought to light, because hopefully the companies or the gaming kind of journalistic websites and blogs will now be a bit more wary about coming forth with where they've got their stories from and who they actually know when they're writing about certain people.
Right. And before anyone else, John, wants to jump in, I just want to address something Stephen said directly, because he talked about how they're such a niche group and they're so close together. Stephen, you couldn't be more true, literally. Like, the indie game development scene is in San Francisco. The games journalism scene is in San Francisco. They are in the god same damn city, for crying out loud. So you're absolutely right that it's they're very close together, and they're enabled to be so because of their literal geographic proximity. And I want to address two things. One, the hashtag GamerGate is trending, and it's about this. It's moved away from the initial one, which was Quinspiracy, which was problematic because this isn't really about her. She was the spark. The story isn't about her anymore. But the other one that's trending is called hashtag #NotYourShield. And what that is all the minorities, the gays, or the gay people, the lesbian gamers, the black gamers, the Hispanic gamers, the Asian gamers, all of them who support GamerGate and think that this is a problem are furious at being told they don't exist, at being told by the gaming journalists that all the GamerGate people are just white, cis males in their mother's basements with neckbeards who hate women. They are pissed off at being told that, and they're venting it through Twitter and not your shield, because they're tired of being used as a shield behind these people to cover up for actual corruption. And it's sickening that this would happen, because social issues are a real problem. Sexism is a real goddamn problem. And the fact that it would be used and scapegoated as an issue here when it's not the issue is infuriating and disgusting.
I just want to add that a lot of the stuff that is like recently getting into the news, like a lot of people, even though I don't consider myself a gamer because I play very old games, but a lot of this stuff was it was kind of known by I'm assuming it was known by Nick beforehand, Jeff too, that these guys that get exclusive like first reviews where the game company will send them, and I realize this isn't the only issue, but where the game company will send them a copy of the game before everybody else so that the first review is done by a specific person. Like, those are always shady and like have backhanded deals in them, because if people gave horrible reviews to games that they were offered exclusive access to, next time around that game company's not going to share it with them. So like that's also obvious. I mean, that should be obvious to people. If it's not, you're welcome. And also, the thing about the gaming journalists comparing gamers to members of ISIS and all that ridiculousness, it's funny and it's kind of ironic because they're the same people who are lambasting those same gamers for the language that they use and how over the top it is. Like, for instance, when you're playing like Call of Duty online or whatever. So it's kind of super funny that they're using the same tactics as 13-year-olds do when they headshot you and then teabag you.
What's so bizarre about this is the vitriol is coming out from the media about to their audience. And so I want to ask you a question because you guys are most of you are younger than me. I'm kind of like Sean. Like, I don't consider myself a gamer. I played games all growing up, but like the new generation has passed me by. I got other stuff going on right now. It's no secret that there's more vitriol on the internet than there is anywhere else in the world. Because like Jeff said, and this is one reason why I quit gaming. One, because you have to play so many games online now. You can't just plug up by yourself and play anymore hardly. And then the people are just so freaking rude and racist. And it's because you can say the N-word and you're not going to get punched in the face like you do if you say it in real life to someone. So do you think, is that why we have this issue? Like, because gaming journalists or whatever are younger, they've grown up in this world where everything turns into a cat fight, on a dime, and you just say the most horrible, disgusting things about one another in the comment section or whatever, regardless of how trivial the offense is. Is that why, like, you see do you think, is that why you see the gaming media turning on its own audience? Because that's the world they've grown up in?
A lot of these journalists who are being called out now for some of the stuff happen to also be, I guess for lack of a better term, social justice warriors. And I think that's part of it too, is they might actually genuinely perceive this as, to some degree, sexism and misogyny. Which might even be worse, is the fact that they literally don't understand the problem. And that's what's amazing too. And I think part of it is also they've never really been faced with such severe criticism before, that they're not sure how to react to it. Because it's not criticism of the usual variety on the internet. I mean, as you said, there's also racism and vitriol here. There's a reason the comment "don't feed the trolls" has come out, and why people like 4chan, by the way, fun tidbit about that, 4chan I'll address shortly. There's a reason why 4chan had things like, for lack of a better term, tits or GTFO. It's because the value of anonymity is important. We don't care about you for your sex or your gender. That's not important. What matters is that in your anonymity you are all equal, and you can all talk equally and address each other equally and not have to worry about being discriminated based on any of those criteria. That's the original purpose of why that whole tits or GTFO thing came out, was because we don't care about your sex. And if you're going to show that, then you've already demonstrated that you're willing to show that you're here for attention, and that was the initial premise. We can talk about the validity of that at some other time, but that was the thought. But that's that mentality of there's value in anonymity, and that as long as you're anonymous, you can say terrible things. That's fine, because for the most part, most people don't mean it. And I mean, this is why the trolls argument doesn't exist, is because it's not like someone saying this to your face in real life, because that's putting a face to the words. That's putting a person to the threat, and in that case, they're also right in front of you saying it. This is people literally across the world who just say things because they're looking for reactions, and that's why the "don't feed the trolls" thing exists. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't take things like death threats and actual harassment seriously, especially when things like doxing are about, where they basically publish your personal information. Which, by the way, it's the people against GamerGate who have done that about people asking for transparency. They've been doxing those people, which is insanity. But the thing, I want to go back to 4chan very quickly. There was a group called the Fine Young Capitalists who were going to do a game jam, and the idea was we want to get other people involved in gaming, like people like women. We want to get them involved in developing games. So you bring a concept to us, we'll do the artwork for you, and the funds that are raised for this will go to charity. That was the idea. They got attacked by the indie developer. I'm not going to say her name. Sorry, not the indie developer directly. The indie developer came for questions, and it inevitably boiled down to how much money was being taken, or she was going to get for it. And then her friends, one of which happens to be a journalist at Kotaku, who is also the person who wrote positive reviews for some of her friends' games, doxed the fine young capitalists and just totally shut the thing down. Well, in a great show of bipartisanship, 4chan has put together something like a grand total of $20,000 to get the Fine Young Capitalist Game Jam back up and running. 4chan, the place frequently cited as a misogynist, hate-filled den, raised $20,000 in total now to get to fund a game jam to get people who aren't white, who aren't male, who aren't straight involved in making games.
And I think what kind of moral of that story is you don't fuck with professional interneters. I can't really think of any other term to describe it. These are the people who know how the internet kind of like runs. They know its unwritten rules. But I think as well is that one thing I said earlier is that there's more and more these days, because gaming is becoming more and more mainstream, that those who go in to do journalism degrees see becoming a gaming journalist as a viable option. When I was doing my master's degree at Bournemouth University, I knew a number of people there who are really into gaming and they wanted to become gaming journalists. So because they have the professional training and kind of the ethics training, they all have to do an ethics module and a law module in respect to journalism. They all understand the clarity, and I've seen them now acting as journalists at gaming events. They're getting press passes, but they understand kind of the relationships that they form. And I think for the most part, a lot of us, if I read a review, and if it was a kind of a really good review, kind of gave a game 8 out of 10, but just said, oh, by the way, this person had, went to college with this. I mean, I don't know the level of intimacy you want to know about the relationships of people, but I don't mind them writing about biased reviews. The whole point of a critic is to say whether it's good or bad. You just want to know where they're coming from, and that's the issue. If there's just a bit more transparency, this entire issue would be fine. No one would really care about how kind of like close these people are to each other, just as long as we know how close they are. The closeness isn't the issue, it's whether we know that they're close or not.
Yes, and the simple fact of the matter is the damage has been done. These companies, these websites, have seen their ad traffic drop off a cliff in the past couple of weeks because of this. Their videos calling them out have, the first one I saw had 800,000 views on it. The gaming community is not falling for their shit. They're pissed off at this, very pissed off, and they have every right to be, because their gaming journalists not only aren't disclosing their shit, they're harassing the very audience they claim to be writing for, and on top of all of that, they're claiming the gaming community is misogynist and scapegoating a serious issue to avoid dealing with their own corruption.